If you're dating after 40 and you keep attracting Mr. Unavailable on repeat, and what you really want is lasting love with Mr. Right, you're in the right place. This episode is for you if you want an easy way to avoid those dating disasters. Let's get started. Welcome. I'm truly Eleanor, intuitive dating coach, and today we're going to be talking about using those crucial post-date questions to avoid dating disasters. If you've ever been like me in your dating life and made really regrettable decisions because you weren't really being self-reflective after the date and kind of making choices from your head or feeling like you had to make certain choices, then this is going to be the episode for you. We're going to break down those post-date questions for women over 40. I know that you may have found some information out there on the internet or with other shows about dating and asking questions after the date for yourself, but not specifically around being over 40. And I feel like there's particular things to think about and other challenges that you have when you're dating past 40. And my backstory, if you haven't listened to me before, is I went through a series of challenges over decades of dating the wrong guy, chasing unavailable guys, and being in one toxic relationship after another, or just being with someone who wasn't available to me and wasn't able to show up fully for me until I was able to change those patterns and meet my husband in my 40s. So that's my little backstory. And I wanted to talk about specific things that I started to do to change this pattern. One of them was to be a lot more reflective after the date and not from the mind. That's another thing that you may have run into, that there's a lot of resources out there for dating, but they're purely focused on logic and thinking things out and checklists and cheat sheets, which I offer myself in my courses and the resources that I have. But my focus is always on connecting to your heart, moving from your head to your heart and being connected to your true self and tuning into and listening to your intuition. And that's what actually moved the needle for me, was going from the head to the heart, focusing on my intuition and listening to it, and then bringing in the logical pieces after that. It's always first you go to the heart, first you connect to the intuition, and then you make your decisions in a logical way. You can bring it all together. You don't have to be swinging wildly between woo-woo, spiritual, everything's in the energy, everything's divine timing, everything is attracting your soulmate, and swinging between that and being completely logical and having a checklist and not being woo-woo at all. I like to come to the middle because we need both. I want you to think about the times that you might have been too logical and in your head and then making those kind of decisions that really didn't turn out well. And I'm going to tell a story about myself in a minute. Or those times when you got caught up too much in the spiritual world. And I've been an intuitive healer for many, many years and decades, and I've seen it all. So I understand when you swing too far into the spiritual world and you're too focused on the energy of things, you're not living in the moment and you're not able to actually navigate through the ins and outs of the, I don't want to say real world, but the concrete, tangible world in front of you and figuring out, okay, how do I talk to this guy? And this is not about the 10th dimension. This is about sitting in front of someone at a coffee shop. I like to bring it home so you can walk away from these episodes and have something very tangible, but it is grounded in a spiritual connection to yourself. Let me tell you a story about when I met someone online. And I went for a date and I thought he was handsome and we were having a discussion and everything was going really well. And he was asking me a lot of questions. So I thought that is great. I really like this. And so we were continuing on. And then I started to express my thoughts and opinions about certain things. And I am also trained as a holistic nutritionist. So I was talking about nutrition and holistic ways of healing the body and things like that. And all of a sudden he decided that he was going to start jumping in and do pretty much like a combat debate type of thing and start debating me on the legitimacy of what I was saying and what credentials I actually had, and how did I know this, and what article did that come from, and where was this research, and all of these things. So just basically really denigrating me and being very condescending. And I found myself, instead of saying, hey, you know what, this is really not going to work out. I'm not going to sit here and debate with someone on a date. I actually leaned in, and it triggered something within me where I felt like I had to prove myself. And so I leaned into it even harder and started to feel that self-doubt and want to really prove that I knew what I was talking about, or I was worthwhile to continue dating. And the funny thing is, I'm going to talk, the reason why I want you to do these post-date questions is then you think about, why did I do that? And what was that trigger? And then did I actually even like that person? The way the date ended up was, I really fought hard for my position. I made myself kind of lay out like, "Oh, this is what I know and this is why I know it." And I remember feeling very frustrated and very insecure. But I felt like, oh, okay, I did it. I convinced him, or whatever it was. I passed the test. He got really angry over the conversation and saying, well, that's dumb and all this stuff. And believe it or not, I mean, it sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but I felt like I had to prove myself. I proved myself in quotes. And then he said, well, we should go on another date. I had a really great time. And I was just flabbergasted. But the funniest part was I went on another date. I went on a few dates with him because, again, I felt like I had to pass a certain test. And then because he made me work so hard for it, so to speak, I felt like, oh, I really want to date him. I started chasing after him, in other words. And the title of this podcast is Stop Chasing Unavailable Guys. This was a perfect example of what I was doing in the past. So instead of saying, well, what kind of rude, insecure person themselves would start a debate with someone on a date, and what kind of person would denigrate someone's opinions or life's work or view of life, instead of doing that, I dialed in and felt like I had to really be more attractive, or to get him to like me. Obviously, it turned out badly because I was chasing after him and he was a real jerk. And so it ended up being a case of he was just a terrible person and he just wanted to somehow best someone, or that was sort of his thing. And it was obviously not a characteristic or person I wanted to be anywhere near. And he ended up ghosting me, which is the funniest part of all. And that's not funny at all, because I know that I probably would have dated him and wasted quite a bit of time. So there you have it. That's what I was doing. And that's why I really want to help you to avoid that. If you've ever been in that situation where you find yourself, even though you don't even really like the person, you find yourself getting caught up in that pattern of wanting them to like you and people pleasing and all of that stuff. How can we prevent that? I do a lot of work on, if you go back in the other episodes, and especially this season 4, I talk a lot about emotional healing. When we do the emotional healing, we don't have as many of those triggers. We understand what we're doing. Even if we start to do the behavior that we don't want to do, or we're in the pattern, at least we recognize it in time, and then we can dial it back. And that comes through pre and post date preparation. And I do a lot of that in my courses, the Intuitive Path to Love, and different audio courses where I talk to you about how to prepare yourself spiritually and in a tangible, grounded way before the date and after the date, and even during the dating process where you're on the apps. Let's break it down into the tangible piece now. And I go into a lot of how to get into the spiritual part of it and how to get into your intuition and all of that in the other past seasons. You can go back and listen to that. Here's the practical part. We want to look at, what are we going to ask ourselves when we come home? You can give yourself a bit of time. You can even do it the next day. It's sometimes better when you're really in the moment to come home from the date and start journaling. So get out your journal and ask yourself this question. This is the number one, probably most important question that I was ignoring for years. How do I feel around this person, or when I think about them? Now, that's two different things, and it's also separate from how do I feel about them. You're not asking that. I want you to throw that question out the window. You want to know how you feel in your body, how you feel in your heart, how you feel in your nervous system, or even just how you're feeling physically, emotionally, etc. when you were with the person and when you think about them. You can break that down into part A and part B if you want, and get really nuanced. Like, how did my body feel? For example, when I was on that date, when he started arguing with me, I felt angry. I felt enraged almost at being condescended to or talked to like that. I had a lot of self-doubt. I was feeling bad about myself. I was feeling ashamed. When you break that down, you're like, do I want to date someone like that? You really want to get into the feelings. And then on the flip side of that, if you felt relaxed, if you felt calm, if you felt open and you were expressing yourself authentically and not censoring yourself and not worrying about how you were coming across, and you were feeling safe, then that is obviously a beautiful place to start. And you really want to be like, okay, well, I definitely want to be around this person again. And then the part B would be when you think about them, thinking about the date afterwards. How did you feel? It's a little more nuanced because you're away from the person. You're not in their space anymore. And you're thinking about, okay, what kind of person were they? How did they show up? And then pay attention to the feelings that come up when you start investigating that. Those are literally the most important questions to be asking. And if you just do that, you're going to be miles ahead if you just do those two questions. But we can move into, there's 5 of them. The next one would be, what did they do to show they were interested? And in my case, when I thought about that, I was assuming that they weren't interested and then wondering, why did they take such an aggressive approach? He assumed I wanted to go on another date. He's like, where should we go next time? It was actually a very aggressive approach, and I hadn't done any self-reflection at the time, so I didn't really think about those things. You want to know, what did they do to show interest? Were they leaned in? Were they saying nice things to you? Were they saying, well, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Were they looking relaxed? Did they look like they were paying attention? What were they doing to show they were interested? That's a great question. Number 3, am I interested in getting to know this person? Do I feel curious about them? And this is also, you can do this with the heart space and with the head as a combination. Just thinking about it, even putting your hand on your heart, you close your eyes and you think about the person. Do I feel drawn to them? Do I want to talk to them more? And you can check in around that. That's a really nice way to come at that angle. And then, am I interested in sharing something about myself? Or do I feel excited to express who I am? Let me compare the date I was talking about, where I spent the whole time defending myself and feeling very tense about everything. And what I was sharing was me fighting for my life, essentially. I was trying to express myself in a way that was very defensive, and it didn't feel good. As opposed to the date with my husband, my first date with him, 3 hours of talking back and forth, and I was excited, I was gushing, I was wanting to tell him things. And 3 hours later, we closed the restaurant down. So I was very excited and interested in sharing myself, and I didn't want to censor myself. Of course, you don't want to overshare and things like that, but I was sharing at the appropriate level, but I was very excited about what I was sharing. Do I feel grounded, confident, and relaxed enough to disagree with them, say something that is the opposite of what they are talking about? Or do I keep my mouth shut so I can enjoy the date? This is also one I really want to highlight for you as an example in my terrible date and my continuing wasted dates. I censored myself a lot, but then I also got into a very defensive mode of defending my point, and it was the opposite of his. And I felt very attacked and uncomfortable. And a lot of times I did keep my mouth shut because I would argue a certain point and then not want to really say more or say authentically what I was feeling. And so the number 5 would be an absolute no way. I did not feel grounded. I did not feel confident. I did not feel relaxed. And you really want to dial into this. My example was extreme. It was a very obvious example, obvious to myself later on in the years, obvious to anyone else who might be on the outside listening to this story. That like, oh, why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she get up and say, you're a jerk? I'm not going to waste my time anymore. Those are a lot of great questions. And at the time, I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have the acceptance of myself. I didn't have the connection to myself. And I wasn't at the point of healing where I could recognize and feel safe enough to say, This is absolutely the opposite of what I'm looking for. I wish you well, but I am out of here. And so the happy ending, the good news is that I did get out of that eventually. I'm talking down the road. I did overturn those patterns and I stopped doing that. And I do have a wonderful and healthy relationship with my husband. I did overcome that, and I really want to help you. If you're in that position and you wonder, why did I do that? Why am I interested in that person? Why did I defend myself and then go on another date and another date? And I would say to those questions, there's really no answer. It's just you are in the space you're in and you're ready to learn and you're ready to do things differently so you can have the love you're looking for, the kind of love that feels like home. And it is possible, and that's what I teach, and it is definitely doable and is possible. Even after 40, it's never too late. That's why I always love to say, remember, love is closer than you think. I hope this has been helpful, and I would love for you to go back and write down these questions so that you have a really nice framework that you can follow after your dates and start dating in a way that is more intentional and empowered for you. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. And remember, love is closer than you think.